America has been blessed with some great consoles, including the original NES, the Sega Genesis, and the Sony PlayStation. Ah, nostalgia. Then there's all the generations of consoles which followed. Between these huge debuts, other countries, like Japan, got their hands on a slew of consoles never released in the United States. Check out some of the hits, the duds, and the revolution which led to our favorite consoles ever. Before you watch, click subscribe. You'll join our notification squad and be the first to know of new content. Without further ado, here are 8 game consoles that never made it to America. Nintendo Color TV Game 6. Nintendo's introduction to the home console market was a far cry from the Nintendo Entertainment System we know and love. In 1977, the Nintendo Color TV Game 6 was released in Japan. Yes, that's the real name. There was no Mario, no Duck Hunt, and none of the classic rectangular controllers that were just as iconic as the console itself. The home console system played much like an Atari. It was packaged with 2 connected knobs on each side and the power options on the console itself. The orange design scheme looked like a partnership with Nickelodeon, but a white version of the console was also released. While the Nintendo Color TV Game 6 is an important part of Nintendo history, don't expect to see the Classic Edition get released anytime soon. The console only had one game, the straightforward title Light Tennis. It was a simpler time in 1977. Basically a colorized version of Pong. Players would move their paddles on the side to hit the ball across to try and defeat their opponent. Seems simple, right? Nintendo tried to make the game seem a little deeper than it was. They added different versions of the game, including multiple obstacles appearing in the center of the board. No matter how fancy you try to make it, Pong is Pong. Nintendo was likely testing the market as graphics improved, and the future of the Nintendo console division was just taking form. An upgraded version known as the Color TV Game 15 featured better joystick controls and a number of different games to choose from. The success of these consoles helped form the NES we know and love today. Casio Loopy. The developers at Casio were trying to find a way to cater a gaming console exclusively towards girls. Their solution? A purple console with hearts on it. Cause of course, that's what girls like, right? Even though they were going for a specific audience with cliché designs, the Casio Loopy console had some positive attributes when it was first released in Japan back in 1995. The late release date of the Casio Loopy made it feel outdated already. Still, the console had something we never knew we wanted on a gaming device: a sticker printer. The thermal sticker printer could be used with games and even print out screenshots from VCRs or DVD players. The sticker printer itself was probably better than any of the gaming elements featured on the Loopy. After investing so much money into the Loopy, gamers were probably surprised to find out there were only 10 games released for the console. Some versions came packaged with Anime Land. The game allows players to create their own anime characters with a number of custom settings. A majority of the other games were storyline-based dating games, because girls. The non-action titles were played using a controller featuring 4 buttons and a D-pad. Oddly, the Loopy creators must have thought girls only played games alone, because the console was packaged with just one single controller port. Oh, that's lonely. The low library of games and release date of the console forced sales to deplete in Japan, and the console was never popular enough for Casio to ever consider the United States. But how am I gonna print off my stickers? Bandai Playdia. Ugh, no kid wants some knockoff educational console. But this is what Bandai tried pushing in the form of the Playdia. Learning while playing video games, ew. Right out of the gate, players could tell this Japanese release was catered to the very young children. The bright blue console, designed with pops of yellow, looked like a rainbow explosion and screams kindergarten all over it. Released in 1995, the console ran on CD-ROMs, but doesn't play games like you're used to. Most of the content for the Playdia felt like an interactive movie. Players wouldn't control characters, they would play through a digital choose-your-own-adventure, making different choices and decisions based on the actions on screen. In other words, things got boring pretty quick. There were a number of Dragon Ball Z games released, but nothing worthwhile, even if you were a die-hard fan of the series. A large amount of games featured the Japanese cult hero known as Ultraman. This consisted of different adventures, stories, and action-based titles. One of the main highlights was the controller. The Playdia controller was wireless, with a similar design to the original Wii controller. The directional buttons also acted as media navigation, and 2 input buttons were used for action. The wireless device communicated using infrared rays, much like a television remote. This meant the reaction time wasn't as fast as it should be, but the whole wireless aspect is appealing to a lot of gamers. Ahead of its time, really. Unfortunately, the console only supported one controller, eliminating any possibility of a multiplayer game. When children were done playing, which probably took all of 5 minutes, the console features a built-in slot for the controller, so it doesn't get lost. Too bad for Bandai, the only thing lost was any type of profit. Heyo, buzzing! Amstrad GX4000. Don't count the Brits out yet. After years of console dominance from countries like Japan, Britain decided to join in on the console wars with the release of the Amstrad GX4000. And this is why everyone is still playing the Amstrad today. Wait, they're not playing it? Oh, it was a huge failure? Yeah, okay. Let's rewind for a second. Released in 1990, the Amstrad GX4000 was off store shelves by 1991. The blink and you'll miss it console release failed for many reasons. The look of the console felt like an imitation of the NES. It featured all dull gray design and had nothing to make it stand out and felt like it could smash into pieces with just one fall off the entertainment center. Oh no, my console is broken. The console itself relied on playing computer game releases. These European releases were much cheaper to get for a computer, and players had no reason to shell out hundreds of dollars for this worse-off version. Oh, it was a rip-off, it was. The game selection wasn't bad. It included the side-scrolling RoboCop 2 and a few pretty good racing games. It was just impossible to enjoy them because of the cheap controller. Lightweight, stiff, and noisy, the GX4000 controller was pretty much a piece of garbage. It looked like a third-party Nintendo controller ripoff, but was the main controller for the console. Another problem players dealt with was the AC adapter the console came with. If the adapter wasn't plugged in a specific order, it could instantly short the system and possibly cause a fire. What are you trying to do to us, Britain? A small console fire was probably more entertaining than anything else the GX4000 had to offer, though. Nevertheless, errors like this typically meant doom for a console anyway. One of the more mind-boggling parts of the GX4000 was the pause button. Instead of being featured on the controller, a giant pause button was attached to the console. This meant players had to get up just to pause the game. Maybe it's an exercise thing, I don't know. The huge design flaw was a mess and the console quietly drifted away, but not on a ship to the United States. Yes, you can keep this console to yourself, Britain, thank you. Fujitsu FM Towns Marty. Years before the PlayStation or Sega Saturn, Japanese gamers got their hands on a CD-ROM console known as the Fujitsu FM Towns Marty. I'm sorry, what? That's actually what it's called, okay. The fast little console with a not-so-catchy name was actually pretty impressive for its time, but never caught on fully due to the high price tag. Originally released in 1989 at the retail price of $700, which is pretty much like $1 billion now, the console featured a lot of industry standards which took years to adapt to. The FM Towns Marty, seriously what a terrible console name, featured 32-bit graphics and was the first home console to do so. It played a lot like a PC, and the game library was pretty extensive due to the ability to play computer games. The controller itself only features a 2-button mechanism, but it was enough for most of the games at the time. PC games like Monkey Island 2 and Indiana Jones and The Fate of Atlantis could be played on the console with smooth graphics and great gameplay. A small SARM card slot acted as a memory card so players could save progress within the various games they played. The SRAM was a huge upgrade and saved players from losing progress and starting all over. In the days before hard drives were the norm, this was a huge plus. Remember when 8 megabytes felt like a lot? When you weren't playing games, the CD-ROM drive also acted like an audio CD player and could play all types of music through your television. A microphone jack even allowed you to sing along with your favorite songs. Karaoke CDs were released for the system, but never really took off, much like the games. Years later, the Sony PlayStation would have a number of the same features, but offered better graphics. The FM Towns Marty showcased the future of consoles at the time, but a name sounding like a local radio station and a lack of interest caused the console to ultimately fail. The whole American gaming industry could be a lot different if this console was released here. NEC PC FX. Years before we were purchasing vertical stands for the PS4 and Xbox One, the NEC PC FX knew what we wanted in the form of a console style. First released in 1994, the console was designed a lot like a PC, using the tower design and giving gamers room for upgrades. The PC FX featured upgrade slots for extra memory, space, and features, but the console was not out long enough to provide any of them. One of the major mistakes with the system was the decision to stick with only 2D graphics. The PC FX was capable of doing 3D, but NEC decided to focus on providing only the best 2D graphics possible. The baffling decision led to games with good graphics, but designs which already felt outdated when compared to the other systems at the time. The system had a top-loading CD-ROM, which could also play all types of other media, including anime and, oddly enough, Kodak Picture CD-ROMs. The controller design was fairly nice, sporting 6 input buttons and smooth D-pad controls. In total, the NEC PC FX had a weak library of 62 games. Many of these games were strange puzzle games that lacked a lot of depth to them. They were boring after being played a few times, and the power of the PC-style console was wasted on these simple titles that could easily be played on other devices and often for free. Other game options included a variety of fighting games and some side-scrolling adventures. A majority of the games were designed in an anime style. Cutscenes featured real anime, but it was one of the few highlights and not enough to win gamers over. The release of the NEC PC FX came when gamers were getting introduced to the world of 3D. Despite the power behind the system, it instantly felt outdated and failed to catch on like it could have. This left the NEC PC FX as a Japan exclusive, likely racking up a lot of dust on store shelves. Sega SG-1000. Before Sega could flaunt their success with Sonic the Hedgehog, they were busy working on the console side of things first. The very first console Sega ever released was the Sega SG-1000. It didn't have quite the same flow as the Genesis or Master System, but the console itself was a pretty good option back in 1983. Much like the consoles following it, the SG-1000 was cartridge-based, and a number of different games were released. Before the classic black ABC controller was created, the SG-1000 used a joystick controller with 2 buttons located on the side. The Sega logo we still know and love today is located front and center on the console, right in front of the cartridge port. Ah, branding at its best. Despite the success of the SG-1000, the Japanese console never got a release in America. It could have been a hit here thanks to the large game library it boasted. A number of sports titles like Champion Soccer, Champion Ice Hockey, Champion Billiards, and Champion Pro Wrestling were fun for their simple concepts. If you wanted to be a champion, there was also a number of fast-paced action titles like the Black Onyx and Pitfall 2. By the time the Sega Master System came out, it was backwards compatible with the SG-1000, making the console all but obsolete. Then we were met with the little blue hedgehog, and hey, the rest was history. Bandai WonderSwan. When it came to portable gaming systems in America, no one could really touch Nintendo's success. Sega tried with the Game Gear, but the Game Boy prevailed, and this is probably one of the main reasons we never got our hands on the Bandai WonderSwan. Released in 1999, the WonderSwan handheld featured similar graphics to the original Game Boy and was actually designed by the original Game Boy designer. The handheld console had a couple of features which helped it stand out against the dominant competition. One of these features was the ability to play games both vertically and horizontally. Ooh. An extra control pad was placed in the top left corner of the console, completely changing the way developers could design games. It's almost like how phones and tablets can rotate positions today, so accommodate different types of games. Another huge highlight with the system was the ability to operate using just one AA battery. Now there's a plus. Battery power was always a pain with portable systems, but replacing a single battery is fairly easy. This was a huge selling point for the WonderSwan and something fans were drawn to when looking for cheap portable gaming. The WonderSwan found success early on and eventually released a color version of the console. The only problem with continuing the success was the release of the Game Boy Advance. The graphics and power blew the WonderSwan out of the water and was a big reason for its demise. Damn you, Nintendo! Well, there you have it. Which console do you wish you could try? Are there any we missed? What's your favorite console of all time? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to The Gamer on YouTube so you can stay up to date with all our awesome videos.
It's-a me, Mario! Woohoo!